listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. In celebration of the new Chucky series debuting on USA and SyFy, we are going to start our first two-part retrospective on the Chucky franchise. Today we will be covering Child's Play 1 through 3. Next week we will do the Of Chucky movies, which is Bride of Chucky all the way through Curse of Chucky.
And I will say this, and the main reasons I'm so glad that we're making this a two-part thing is because this is not just any franchise. Every movie has something to like about it. Even, everybody agrees that 3 is the worst one, but even it is entertaining. I don't think there's any movie in the whole franchise that sucks.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Chucky, for me, has been the most consistent slasher franchise. Anybody who knows me knows how I'm not crazy about the Halloween sequels, and I really despise kind of the direction they took it in, except for the David Gordon Green ones. The Friday the 13th ones are a funny one because I think they get better as they go along, but it's still a very wonky franchise in terms of consistency. I love the first 4 Nightmare on Elm Street movies and the 7th one, but there's a couple in there that are kind of duds, especially the 6th one. This one is Child's Play has been consistently entertaining for a long period of time. I'd say Scream is also another one that's successful, but it's not as frequent as Child's Play, and it hasn't been as long running. But to have a slasher film franchise centered around a supernaturally possessed killer doll with 7 entries and have not one of them be bad is impressive as hell to me, and I think it's one of probably the most exciting franchise to explore as far as the major slasher franchises go, I think.
Yeah, well, I love how it started with the first one. So I love how the franchise began. I love what it became. It became something totally different than how it started. So I equally loved what it became, and then the show brings in elements of the original and what I loved about the original and what I loved about what it became. So the series is a really good amalgamation of the whole franchise for me.
Yes. So we're going to get started with the original one, right? Child's Play from 1988.
Yes, came out in 1988, directed by the great Tom Holland, who did Fright Night.
Not Spider-Man, Tom Holland.
Yeah, not that one, the older Tom Holland. And written by, of course, Don Mancini, who we were privileged enough to see introduce the show and the first installment of Child's Play when we went to Beyond Fest. So it was written by Don Mancini and also written by John Lafia, who was the writer-director of Man's Best Friend, and he also went on to direct Child's Play 2, and also co-written by Tom Holland. It stars Catherine Hicks in an awesome performance as the mom, Karen Barkley. Chris Sarandon from Fright Night, of course. He's a hero in this one instead of the villain in Fright Night. He plays Mike Norris, the cop. Alex Vincent, of course, is Andy Barkley. Awesome performance by him. Excellent child actor performance. And then, of course, Brad Dourif is Charles Lee Ray, or Chucky. Everybody knows it's about serial killer Charles Lee Ray is cornered in a good guy doll factory by policeman Mike Norris and uses voodoo to transfer his soul into a doll that is given to Andy Barkley as a birthday gift from his mom. The possessed doll soon goes on a killing spree to avenge those who wronged him and transfer his soul into Andy's body. And I love this one because it starts out, the opening sequence isn't that subtle, but after the opening sequence, it gets pretty subtle with the tension and suspense. And Chucky doesn't speak for 45 minutes of the film. So the first 45 minutes is like masterfully plays with tension and ambiguity, with of course, great performances by Catherine Hicks, Chris Sarandon, Brad Dourif, and Alex Vincent, especially in the crying scene when Andy Barkley he goes back against the door and kind of slides down the door crying. You really believe that he's scared to death and devastated. He thinks he's going to die.
Well, one of the things I want to say about the first film, something that I find really interesting about it, you mentioned that Chucky doesn't really appear for about 45 minutes. Like, it's very subtle the way that it plays out. I think that has a lot to do with well, maybe it doesn't have to do with it. From what I understand, the marketing at the time really played into this fact. So take yourself back to 1988, before there's a Chucky franchise, before we know what Child's Play is. From what I understand, this film was not advertised as a film about a killer doll. And even the poster, the classic Child's Play poster, is nothing more than Aunt Maggie falling from the apartment window to her death. And a lot of the early advertisements were baked in a lot of misdirection, where I think they were trying to suggest that possibly it was about a little kid who snapped, or a little kid who was a killer. And I think that the movie really plays with that for a long while. I have to say, the opening scene, which I love, it's an awesome opening sequence. We get to see Brad Dourif like running around, and it's kind of an epic little sequence. That's the only thing that works against this for me. If you deleted that opening sequence, this plays very subtly, and if you never knew what it was, you would spend half your time wondering if it's actually just the kid, if it's in his imagination, or if it's actually the doll. And I think other than that unsubtle opening sequence, the movie does a really good job of playing with that. If you can put yourself in that frame of mind where you don't know what Child's Play is, you could definitely see some misdirection and possibilities that, hey, maybe Andy's the killer. And I think that makes it that much more exciting and I don't know how to put gratifying when it becomes very clear that Chucky is in fact alive.
I remember it very vividly, the whole marketing campaign, because no doll was in any of the commercials. Wasn't even a doll mentioned in any of them. You had to know, by word of mouth that it was even a doll. And that's what Don Mancini originally planned on doing. He originally planned on keeping Chucky hidden and not letting you know that it was actually Chucky until well into the movie, and it kind of changed over the course of rewrites. But the ambiguous marketing campaign, you really couldn't tell. It actually, the commercials actually looked like Andy was the killer.
Okay.
And so going into it, I remember everybody was excited when this movie came out. Genius marketing, and then it's a great build up in the movie to, because we know that Charles Lee Ray is in the doll, like you said, from the opening sequence, but he still manages to ratchet that tension up through the whole thing, because you're like, when is Chucky going to come out? And it's like 45 minutes in, and when he finally does, and wow, is it satisfying when he finally comes to life.
And what I like is that this is not what I would say the definitive Chucky movie in terms of what you think of what has defined the Chucky formula. But I actually think for the most part, his by the time he shows up, his first like full-on scene where he comes to life, you get a sense of his personality within a couple of minutes. He's been described in the sequels as a foul-mouthed little fucker. He's supposed to be a vile little thing, and that's kind of the appeal of Chucky. He's a little children's doll, but he's vile, and he's very I don't know, politically incorrect is not really the word I'm looking for, but he's very crude and disrespectful. So that the first things that he says, the first words that leak out of his mouth as the killer doll are, "You stupid bitch, you filthy slut, I'll teach you to fuck with me." That shows you right from the first lines that he speaks, you know this killer's personality and you know what he's like. And I love that. And every time I've shown this movie to people who've never seen it for the first time, everybody starts like they're excited, but they start cracking up at that line because it's so abrupt and it just comes out so viciously and so direct. After 45 minutes of, is it real? Is it not? We're not really seeing it, to have him come to life that quick and you see his foul-mouthed, angry little tendencies is exciting, gratifying, and a little funny too. A little funny.
Yeah. Well, I've seen this movie countless times, and there's two scenes that I always wait with bated breath. Is when he comes to life, and then when he's left in the elevator, and he kind of starts going up the elevator, and the old couple is in there, and the lady turns around. Oh, what an ugly doll! And he starts going up. Fuck you.
Yeah.
I always wait for those two scenes.
Those are two funny scenes. So, like I think a lot of people try to remember Child's Play as the one that was serious or more serious than some of the sequels, and it is. I'd say it's a little bit more serious, but I think Chucky's personality and what he's meant to be in terms of like the humor that's apparent in the character, and he is influenced a little bit by Freddy Krueger. Don Mancini has gone so far to say that Freddy Krueger was a big influence on Chucky in terms of being a serial killer who talked and who had wisecracks and who said funny, foul things. But I think you get a very good idea in the first film what Chucky is really like.
Yeah, and mixed with a lot of the fun, the elements of this is also some masterful sequences. Like the whole babysitter sequence is amazing, right up until she goes out the window,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see that cement weighted dummy just slam onto that car below. And you've had just enough time to get to know this woman, and then of course the part where Chucky comes alive in the mom's arms, and then the car scene with Chris Sarandon.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It never gets old. It's convincing. It's scary. It's exciting. You see Chucky attacking him from behind and trying to choke him and shit, and then he starts jabbing the knife through the seat. And then he jabs it under the seat between his legs. Just so exciting and visceral and well filmed. And every shot is just to perfection.
Yeah.
And then that, of course, the entire finale in the apartment, so memorable. Especially if you have that 45 minutes of buildup of like, when's Chucky gonna come? When's Chucky gonna come? And then it ends in this explosive finale that's just so satisfying. A lot of these movies actually have a really explosive finale that's satisfying.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed watching it again is, as opposed to the sequels, they're all a little bit about voodoo. You know, it's about a supernaturally possessed doll, so it's voodoo comes into play. But I think the first one is the most out of all of them that you could actually classify this as a voodoo-based horror movie. I think the elements are a lot heavier in it, from the opening scene to Chucky finding out all the rules, to the voodoo doll that's used the voodoo doll that's used on it, the graffiti on the wall, the murals, and here's another thing, the whole chant of Always Dewey Dumbala. He does this really long chant. All of the movies have shortened that chant. In the first one, it sounds very complex and long, and it sounds like it's obviously speaking a different language, and he's going on and on. The other ones are just Always Dewey Dumbella, give me the power I beg of you. That doesn't go into the language to the same extent. So even the sequels seem to have curbed the influence of voodoo a little bit compared to the original film.
Well, and the original cut of this one even had even more voodoo. It had an extra scene with the voodoo priest performing a ritual and everything. So it was even more, but even with scenes cut out, it still has a lot of voodoo in it with the voodoo priest. And then I love the scene when Chucky comes to kill him and he breaks the voodoo doll's leg. That's a great kill. I love it, a slasher movie like this who throws in just a straight supernatural kill like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And I don't think and that's another thing, none of the sequels do anything like that. That's why I think that out of all of the Child's Play one, this is the one that you could most classify as a voodoo-based horror film. The other ones doesn't have Chucky pulling out voodoo dolls and killing people in that way. And that's another thing. I just thought of it right now. I mean, we still have the series to play out, but it'd be interesting to see if Don Mancini ever returns back to that and tries to amp those elements more to see more voodoo kills, because I think that's the only kill based on voodoo in the entire franchise.
That's what I love about the series too. It's totally unpredictable what he's going to bring back and what he's not. You know what I mean? Because he reaches back into the franchise and plucks these characters out and puts them back in the timeline. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. I just love everything about this franchise. All the different directions it goes in, all the actors involved, all the crew that's involved. Like, if anybody's wondering why Child's Play looks so amazing, the camera work is from Bill Butler. If you don't know Bill Butler, he did Jaws, Grease, Rocky 2, 3, and 4, and especially Frailty. Frailty is one beautiful, haunting film, and largely because of him.
Yeah, very well shot movie. I think a lot of what makes this work also is the lead character, Andy Barclay, Alex Vincent. That's a killer performance. No pun intended. Like he's so good in this movie. He seems believably traumatized by the doll. The scene that you were describing earlier, as he's crying to the doctor and he's crying that Chucky's going to kill me, and he slides down the door. That kid looks believably traumatized. In fact, watching it as I get older, I get a little worried watching Alex Vincent there. I have to be like, what the hell did the director do to this kid to get him to react like that, or to react that scared? Because he looks genuinely frightened. And another piece of acting that I like is when his doctor is being electrocuted with that when Chucky puts the cap on that delivers like shock therapy, and he keeps going stop, and his stops keep getting like weaker and weaker. Like he looks dazed, like it's so far beyond his comprehension that it looks almost as if his mind is like half processing it and half rejecting it at the same time. You could see in his face the process of trauma working out, where he's like accepting it and letting it in enough to let his survival instincts kick in, but kind of blocking it off a little bit. You could see a lot of trauma going on in the child's face, and obviously this would be a very traumatic thing for any child, to have your doll come alive and come after you and try to kill you. But Alex Vincent really is, to me, the best performance in the movie.
And the thing that's even more jarring about his performance is he's not just like some intelligent, well-spoken little kid. He's a regular little goofy little kid.
Mm-hmm.
Who, you know, he doesn't really know what's up. So when he acts like a goofy, like silly little kid, and then he takes on these, you know, these heavy, emotional, dramatic scenes so perfectly.
Another thing that amazes me, you know, that this movie takes place over the course of 2 days.
Oh yeah.
Don't you think that goes by, like, it seems like it's a lot more. It's all, like, if you really think about this, he gets it all, has a babysitter, she's killed. The next day he goes off looking for Eddie Caputo, gets caught up. So 3 days. It takes place over the course of 3 days. So this all happens really fast. Like, in terms of the events, it's not a whole lot of time that's covered in this film.
Yeah.
I found kind of interesting. I always thought it took place over the course of weeks or something like that, when I realized, like, no, this takes place over the course of 2 or 3 days.
It's pretty eventful 3 days.
Yeah, that's why. But yeah, I think to this day it's a pretty exciting slasher. And of course, the puppetry at the time was completely groundbreaking. That the techniques that they used were things that we had never seen puppetry to this extent before, and to this level. It was a big thing. And obviously it was still the beginning of this type of animatronic puppetry, so there is some cheats here and there. They used little people as doubles for Chucky on several sequences, and I think if you pay close attention with that in mind, you could see it at certain points when the movement is a little bit too fluid, you know what I mean, or when he's going a little bit too fast, or when you see more details of the hands coming up to grab the door. It was interesting what they did for it is they would hire little people to dress up as Chucky, and they would make a replica of the set of, like, you know, say for example, the living room where the entire finale takes place, where they would make a replica of the living room but size it up 3 times too big, and then put a little person in there and shoot it like that to give it the illusion that it's the same room. So there's lots of interesting tricks used in this movie to bring Chucky alive, both animatronic puppetry and human beings doing the job as well, depending on what the camera angle is.
That's what they did, especially with the fire scene. It was done by Ed Gale, played Chucky in that scene, and he was actually 30% bigger than the doll. So then they had to make the furniture 30% bigger, and then they also used child actors.
Not 3 times as big. You're right. I stand corrected. 30% bigger, not 3 times as big.
Yeah, and they also used child actors in a couple scenes, and not many people know that when Chucky runs behind Maggie in the hallway, it's actually Alex Vincent's younger sister.
Really?
And what I like about all the shots, especially seeing it on the big screen again, because I haven't seen it in the big screen in years, all the shots where it goes from a doll to like either a little person or a child actor, it's really freaky because it's not overly noticeable. Like if you have to watch really close to notice, okay, that's animatronic, that's a little person. So it's not easily noticeable. You just see this extra freaky looking Chucky run across the screen.
And it
So
happened-
especially on a big screen, you see him, he just looks, especially when it's a kid actor, like the one in the hallway, like, oh, it looks creepy when you get a close look at him.
Yeah, they kind of run by too fast for you to really take in the fact that that's not the doll, and I think that gives it a creepy quality is the quickness of it. Although I have to say the one that lasts the longest is the shot of Chucky burned after he comes back and when he's like hovering over Andy and walking. That's one of the best shots in the film.
And I have to give a shout out to the creator of Chucky, Kevin Yeager. He actually took just a really detailed description from Don Mancini, and he just went and started doing sketches, and they went back and forth until they got one. So Kevin Yeager created Chucky, and then he actually met Catherine Hicks on set, and they were married a year later.
Oh, romance on the set.
Yeah. And another cool fact is, I'm not sure how many people know where Charles Lee Ray's name came from. It's he's named after Charles Manson, Lee Harvey Oswald, and James Earl Ray.
Oh yeah.
So an amalgamation of 3 different killers. And this was also loosely based on the My Buddy doll. That was one of the inspirations that Don Mancini had because he watched the My Buddy doll, and the company never quite recovered
because of this movie.
Yeah, and especially since he named one of the dolls Buddy, and it was named after the Buddy doll. So
See, I feel like that real life PR disaster was mimicked in the sequels, like in part 2 and part 3.
oh yeah.
One of the things that when we were talking about this that I found interesting that you pointed out is how self-contained it is. I mean, obviously any movie that's a slasher movie has the potential for sequels, but it's not set up or directed in such a way, and it doesn't have the type of ending that most slasher movie sequels have, where like a lot of like slasher movies, even the first ones, end with a kind of wink to the audience that the killer is still out there and that the killer is still alive. Even in something as elegant and as artful as Halloween still does that at the end. You'd see it in Friday the 13th where they kill the mother off and then Jason jumps out at the end. That seems to be a staple of these movies because the studio always wants the possibility that the slasher is going to come back, even in A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is one of the few where it actually ends and Chucky is completely eviscerated and that's it and the story's over and there's no teasing the possibility of a sequel. Obviously, though, it was never out of the question, but it doesn't play like a film that's setting itself up for a franchise. It plays like it's a self-contained story that went in, they told the story they wanted to tell, and they were done with it like that. It doesn't have the feel of a movie that was meant to inspire or spawn a franchise.
It also doesn't feel like the franchise went way out there compared to the first one either, because in the first one you have this little suspenseful, little ambiguous quality dramatic horror film, and then by the end it turns into this batshit crazy, wisecracking Chucky little doll running around killing people. So it even gets silly in the first one. So the silly elements that come in and get more prominent in the franchise don't seem so out of place as a whole, as when you look at the franchise as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, the campy elements sit next to the horror elements. I'd still say in the early franchise, the horror elements kind of takes precedence over the comedy elements, though I'd say that's a little less true in Child's Play 2, and it's even less true in Child's Play 3. And by the time we get to the Of Chucky movies, they've completely switched up the formula of what these movies are. But it's a very interesting aspect of this franchise is the humor and how it's incorporated, and how even though it comes in different degrees throughout the series, it's been there from the beginning. You cannot tell me that the first moment Chucky comes alive and the foul-mouthed invective that he spews is not meant to be at least slightly humorous.
Yeah. And I find it very interesting that the film was so graphic that MGM kind of disowned it when it came out. So they produced it and released it and had success with it, and then they disowned it because they had problems with the subject matter. So they sold it to Universal. So when Universal bought the rights, it basically made Chucky another Universal monster, and I think he's just as prominent as any of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's just weird part on the studio, because sometimes you would think all you would care about is money, but the fact that they sold it to you, and to be honest, I'd rather have the franchise with Universal anyway, that's a studio that seems to care a lot more about horror, pretty much more than any other mainstream studio. It's their bread and butter. It's what they've always been known for. It's what drives their Halloween horror nights. And since the beginning with the Universal monsters of like the 1930s, it's always been what Universal is about. So I'm kind of happy that they took the franchise. That's a better home or a better fit for Chucky.
And we recently saw proof that Universal Studio is the better studio for the Chucky franchise, because MGM brought Child's Play back with the remake, and it was just not it.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that though.
Yeah. Another interesting fact about it is before Brad Dourif got the role as Charles Lee Ray, John Lithgow and Gary Oldman were both considered. That would have been interesting choices.
John Lithgow, I could kind of see that actually kind of makes sense. Who was the other one?
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman. I mean, he's a brilliant actor. He's a comedian. I'm sure he could have done something interesting with it. But at the end of the day, Chucky, like Freddy Krueger, is one of those characters who I think you need to have the original actor there. It's Brad Dourif's voice. It's that inflection. It's his vocal delivery that makes Chucky who Chucky is. So I would not have it any other way other than Brad Dourif. And think about this. This is kind of crazy for Brad Dourif. People forget, I know that Brad Dourif has now become a cult icon, a horror icon because of Chucky. But prior to this, Brad Dourif was an Oscar-nominated actor in very serious dramatic roles. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring with Jack Nicholson in a film that swept the Academy Awards. He's in classic movies like Blue Velvet, where he's playing one of Dennis Hopper's cronies. Even great in The Exorcist 3, but this was, to me, kind of an unusual choice to be a slasher movie villain. It was a kind of respected actor like that. And over time, I feel like the horror community has come to claim Brad Dourif. And I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think he's a big part of what makes Chucky Chucky. It's him. He's not a voice that you can replace and expect it to be good. As much as I love Mark Hamill, he's a brilliant voice actor. Don't get me wrong. But you can't replace Brad Dourif with Mark Hamill and expect it to be Chucky. That's just not how it works.
And I'm really happy that an actor with the caliber of Brad Dourif is willing to stick with this franchise through ups and downs, through the whole thing, all the way up to the series recently.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, John Lithgow and Gary Oldman would not have stuck with it.
No, they wouldn't have. and that would have completely have changed the trajectory of the series. If you have to get a different Chucky, then it would have lost some of what it was, and there's no telling where the franchise would have went. I don't think you need the same Chucky in order to maintain this universe. I don't think it works without Brad Dourif.
Yeah. And one more little fact that I thought was really interesting. Chris Sarandon is really a stand-up guy. Did you know that they wanted him as top bill because he was the big name in it? But he refused to have top billing. He insisted that Catherine Hicks be top billed because she carries the film. That's a class act right there.
Really? I was not aware of it, but yes, that is a very classy move on his part. And as history has proven, it was the right move. He is secondary to both her and Andy. And
the movie went on to be a big success. It had a $9 million budget and grossed $44 million worldwide. It should have grossed more, but it went on to great success on video.
Also, keep in mind, in 1988, $44 million was a lot more than $44 million gross would be now. If it were now, that would have been well over $100 million gross.
Especially for a graphic horror film. So now we're moving on to Child's Play 2, a couple years later in 1990. This one was directed by John Lafia, the co-writer of the first one, and written solely by Don Mancini. This one he done by himself.
So this is the first one where Don Mancini had full writing control over the script and everything.
Yeah. Alex Vincent returns as Andy. Brad Dourif returns as Chucky, of course. This is Christine Elise. This is her first film as Kylie, and she's also in the Curse, and she's going to be in the series. Jenny Agutter, she's from American Werewolf in London. She plays Joanne Simpson, and she said this is one of the worst filming experiences she's ever had. I couldn't find any details why. She just said it's one of her worst filming experiences. And then the great Grace Zabriskie from Wild at Heart and Twin Peaks plays Grace Poole. And Beth Grant from Donnie Darko, No Country for Old Men, plays the teacher, Miss Kettlewell. Probably the most satisfying kill in the whole thing. So Andy is now in a foster home after his mom is committed to an asylum. The manufacturers of the Good Guy dolls foolishly reconstruct the doll to prove to the public that nothing is wrong with it. Chucky comes back to life and goes in search of Andy. Now this one, right here, I could tell it went to Universal because it opens up like a full-on monster movie. Burnt Chucky being reconstructed during the title sequence. It was all, he was officially a Universal monster at that point.
Yeah. Fully embracing what the character is.
Yes, and awesome music in this by Graham Revel. Graham Revel did The Crow, Strange Days, From Dusk Till Dawn, Bride of Chucky, Idle Hands, The Ruins. And this is actually his first symphonic film score.
Interesting.
Don Mancini asked him if he'd ever done a symphonic score before, if he'd ever done his own orchestral score. And he told him yes, but he never had. So he kind of faked his way into it and done an amazing job and went on to an awesome career. I love the one of the first kills where he threatens the guy with a squirt gun and then smothers him with a plastic bag. I thought that was an awesome little kill right there.
Well, one of the things that I want to mention about Child's Play 2, and I always had the feeling about this from talking to fans over the years, and I think it was confirmed recently when I watched a special that they had on USA, to hype up the new Chucky television series, is that Don Mancini has said that over the years, talking to fans, that Child's Play 2 seems to be the fan favorite for a lot of Chucky fans, and I think I know why. The original Chucky film is probably a better film, is probably a better movie in terms of like suspense building and as a piece of filmmaking. But this is the Chucky movie that most exemplifies everything that Chucky is to people. For one, there's no sense of mystery in this anymore because it's a sequel to Child's Play, so you can completely dispense with, is he there, is he not, the whole cat and mouse game that it plays for about 45 minutes before you get to it. Chucky is fully formed from the very beginning. So what that means by deleting the sense of mystery is you get more Chucky, more funny lines, and a little bit more of that humor and that sense of that personality kind of that we all come to know as Chucky, the Charles Lee Ray killer. That really comes to full flower, I think, in the sequel. It's the one that most feels like what the idea of what a Chucky movie is, the formula of a Chucky movie, a formula of a Chucky doll. It's a little bit more colorful than the original movie, slightly less serious. I still think this is a lot more serious than some of the later sequels, but I think it has a slightly more playful tone compared to the original. And I think that's the product of putting Chucky a little bit more towards the forefront and letting him have more screen time throughout the entire runtime. It involves a lot more humor. It's the one that I think exemplifies what a Chucky movie is. Not necessarily the best made Chucky movie, but what people think of when they think of a Chucky movie. It's kind of summed up in Child's Play 2.
Yeah, and the movies are actually nothing alike, but it actually does what the timeline of the original Halloween to Halloween 2018 does, where you have this little more measured, suspenseful, tension-filled original, and then it goes to, a few years later where there's more urgency to the killer. The killer's more pissed off. He's more urgent, because in this one, Chucky's turning into human from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So his agenda is urgent. So therefore, the killings are going to be more frequent. They're going to be more brutal. He's going to be wisecracking. He's going to be pissed off more. So it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In the first one, he didn't realize that he was becoming human until very late in the movie, and that's probably why the finale of it becomes so hectic and frantic. The finale of Child's Play is because it kind of clicks with the killer, with the character, that they have to do this fast and now. By having that established right from the beginning, you get more unhinged Chucky throughout the entire running time.
Yeah, and then you get kills like the the running stab that pushes the character into the copy machine and makes copies of her face.
Yeah.
You get kills like that in this one all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And the score gets bigger too. I mean, it starts out big in the title sequence, and then it's kind of serves the film throughout. And then when it gets to the toy factory, the big climax at the end, you got this big score. It makes it feel even more like a Universal monster movie.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's a phenomenal climax. It makes up for the less nuanced Chucky, and it gives Chucky more time to speak. He has more desperation, and he puts himself out there more. So it's a lot more Chucky in this one.
I also think because of that, the movie has a slightly meaner feel to it. It's a slightly more mean-spirited feel to the movie than I think the original Child's Play had. And I think I don't know how to put it, there's more of a kicky touch of sadism to the kills in the sequel than I think there is in the first one, where the first ones were like quick and fast and they're brutal. I sense a lot more sadism in this one. Particularly, I'm thinking of the scene of Miss Catawal who gets killed, but she just gets beaten to death with a ruler, and the way that Chucky approaches her with that smile, and that's such an iconic scene. You've been very naughty, Miss Catawal, and then she starts beating her. The opening scene where you're talking about, he shoots the guy with the squirt gun, like thinking that nothing's wrong, and then strangles and then suffocates him with the plastic bag. The way that the stepfather comes down the stairs, gets tripped up, and right before he's about to fall to his death, he sees Chucky's like, how's it hanging? And like he gets for that 1 second, you can see it registering on his eyes, like, holy shit, I'm actually about to be killed by a child's toy at this moment right now. There's more of a gleeful kick to the kills in this one. That's Chucky having a little bit more fun being Chucky. And I think that's why this one resonates with fans. It's the one that most sticks to, I think, a lot of fans' brains when they think of what Chucky is, the mean-spirited, foul-mouthed little, sadistic little thing running around, causing terror, running amok. Even Grace Zabrisky's death, the moment was kind of funny where she gets photocopied over and over as she's dying, and like horrified reaction, and Chucky getting mad is like, what's the matter, kid? You act like you've never seen a dead body before. There's a lot more mean-spirited edge to the sequel. I don't think it's, like you said, it's not quite as nuanced in terms of its storytelling or in terms of the suspense it's trying to build. It's a little bit more blunt in its sadism, though.
But isn't that what we want in a sequel?
Yeah.
And we want that. We want a big climax, and this one delivered on all of it. And then this is another one with great camera work. The camera work on this one was done by Stefan Sapsky. Mm-hmm. He did Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns, and Ed Wood. Another amazing cameraman in this one.
Those are some beautiful films too.
And there were scenes in this one where Chris Sarandon returns and Catherine Hicks also returns, but they cut him out for budgetary reasons. But even though Catherine Hicks didn't return, she visited the set quite a bit, and she was there all the time to see her husband Kevin Yeager operate the doll. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay, so she's still connected with the franchise then.
Yeah, I'm like, you're right here on set. Go ahead and get in front of the camera.
Another one of the things that I really like about the sequel is hold on one second. Is the cast that they do with this one, and I'm particularly talking about Christine Elise as Kyle, the stepsister. She's not, stepsister, foster sister, whatever you want to call her, to Andy Barclay. I think she adds a much needed, more adult element to the proceedings. I know that she's still a young character, but she's not a little kid, and I think it gives it a different dynamic to have two people that are afraid of Chucky, one of them being a much more grown person. Somebody who has, I guess you would say, a little bit more credibility than Andy does. And what I found interesting about her character is that she exists as a supporting character to Andy, and I think she's likable from the very beginning. A little bit of a rebel, you could tell by the way that she dressed in her early 90s fashion, the type of fashion that would mark a girl out as being rebellious or a little gothic or whatever. Takes a liking to Andy, has a little bit of an attitude problem, is an interesting supporting character. But at the point where Andy gets taken from his foster parents after his foster father is killed by Chucky, she kind of becomes the center of attention in the movie. The movie actually forgets about Andy for a big chunk of the time and starts to focus on her. And in that way, it's probably the only the only Chucky movie that has what you would call the final girl trope. I think this is the only one that features a final girl, because I feel like by the time we reach the climax, the roles are kind of switched, where Andy is the secondary character and she becomes the main character by the end of the movie. And I think she brings a lot to the story. And I love the climax of this film. I think this has the best, the most exciting, and the most memorable climax of any Chucky film. The fact that it takes place in a big factory with a bunch of Chucky dolls, the things that happen, and of course the destruction of Chucky. I thought the first one has an awesome over-the-top death for Chucky, where they burn him, they shoot him to death, blow him up. I think this one goes even further. I like how they cut Chucky's hand off. I like how he gets to a more desperate point, because he realizes that he's not going to make it out of the body, and he's stuck in there. So you could see the anger in his character by the end when he rips his arm off, rips his hand off, and sticks a knife into it. And you get kind of a Freddy Krueger-esque, almost Candyman type of thing, where it's Chucky running around with a knife in the place of a hand. And then the way that he dies with all the melting and everything, and then the explosion at the end, it's kind of spectacular. It has a lot of elements, I'd say, of Cronenbergian body horror, but applied to a toy, to a plastic doll.
And pretty visceral, impressive action to keep that the whole climax pretty heightened, because the climax lasts a pretty long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like cool event after cool event. Like it keeps this level of energy like for the whole remaining last few minutes of the movie.
And I think that climax is another reason this stands out for a lot of fans, is it's just a spectacular finish to a Chucky film. And it has, for my money, Chucky's best death on screen thus far. I mean, we'll probably see more with the Chucky franchise, but it's going to be hard for me to top the way that they melt him, the way that they fuse him, and then he comes out after he gets fused to other things. That reminds me a lot of David Cronenberg's The Fly. It kind of happens in almost the same kind of sequence, where he accidentally gets pushed in and then he comes out fused to other things and is like trying to drag himself along. I feel like the same thing is happening with Chucky, to the point where they kind of blow him up. Heavy David Cronenberg influence I see on the finale of this movie, and I think it's all the better for it.
And what makes him even more of a universal monster than the score is that it's kind of similar to Frankenstein, to the story arc.
Mm-hmm.
He's brought to life by electricity. He searches for his creator to become human, and then his creator rejects him. So there's a lot of parallels to Frankenstein's story.
Yeah, could definitely see it. And of course, Universal is always going to play up the monster aspects of it. So in some ways, it feels a little bit more typical as a slasher movie than the original Child's Play does. It's a little bit more typical. So I think that you lose some of the nuance, some of the suspense, and some of the storytelling skills from the first one. But I think the trade-off is more humor, more kills, more Chucky, more over-the-top action. So I think it's a fair trade-off depending on what you're looking for in a Child's Play movie. The first one's more nuanced, but this one might be a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, the story and execution is like less nuanced, less
Detailed,
less layers and details to it. But this one didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of it just went in swinging, and it keeps swinging all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the reason it's become the fan favorite over the years, or the one that most people in their heads, when they think of Chucky, they think of Child's Play 2.
Oh, and by the way, the reason why the murder of Andy's teacher and the whole toy factory climax was so cool, those were elements that were in the original script that Don Mancini had to take out, so he was able to put them back in this one.
Oh, so that was meant for the original Child's Play.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's probably a good thing that it got saved and used for the sequel.
Yeah. So perfect sequel to a great franchise. It has everything I want in a horror sequel, especially a slasher sequel.
One other thing before I move, I will mention is Alex Vincent's performance. It's still good, but I don't think his character is as traumatized as in the first one, and he's not called upon to do anything as intense as those scenes. So I as good as he is not quite the standout that he is in the first Child's Play. And I think the addition of the sister kind of takes away from that just a little bit. Still a good performance and still very strong. And there's a lot of things I like about it, but I don't think his character is called upon, or the actor, I don't think Alex Vincent was called upon to deliver as intense of a performance as he was the first time around.
But I like that decision, though. I love when kind of a misfit minor character kind of comes in and kind of steals the movie away and becomes one of the main protagonists. I like when that happens.
I like that too, especially since it's a likable protagonist, and also because the direction they take Andy feels right, even though he's not called upon to do as intense moments of acting. It makes sense because a little kid who went through that and who survived it all and then had to get thrown into the foster care system would be a lot more jaded and cynical than the average kid of that age. And you see a little bit more of a heart in Andy. And I think the moment that you notice it the most is when he's on the playground and he keeps throwing the ball against the gate. I really like that scene where he keeps looking and he's waiting, he's plotting, he knows he's coming. And it's a much different Andy than we see in the first film. This is an Andy who starts off already in survivor mode, already with that mentality and already that kind of intensity. So not as intense of an acting performance, but it's the right direction to take that character in.
That's why it's so great that the first one went so batshit crazy, because it added more trauma for him to inform his character for the second one and make him a little more serious.
Agreed. Yeah, Child's Play 2. I don't think it's as good as the first one, but for personal preferences as a fan, and a lot of it is admittedly nostalgia, I have a slight preference for the second one because it's the one that I gravitated to more as a kid, mostly because it was more all about Chucky than the original Child's Play was.
Yeah. So the next one we got up is Child's Play 3. This one was in 1991. This one, they went and got Jack Bender to direct. This was his first feature film. He'd done a lot of TV. He wanted to do a bunch of episodes of Alias, The Sopranos, Carnival, an awesome HBO show. He did a few episodes of Lost and also Game of Thrones. So he kept on directing some great TV after this. And this one was also solely written by Don Mancini. Of course, Brad Dourif returns as Chucky. And Justin Whalen replaces Alex Vincent as Andy Barkley. He was in Blossom. I remember him from Blossom, the show, and also Serial Mom, the John Waters movie. Mm-hmm. Perry Reeves from Entourage and Old School is De Silva, the girl that kind of helps him out in the military school. Jeremy Silvers as the dumb kid Tyler. This is his only film. He was actually pretty good, the little black kid. Mm-hmm. He was so dumb. And Dakin Matthews.
He rose to the occasion at the end, but we'll get to that. I have some criticisms with regards to that character that I find vaguely unbelievable, but we'll get to that after. Go on.
Okay, and Dakin Matthews, I liked him as Colonel Cochran. The best kill in the movie was Colonel Cochran's kill. He was from The Office, Gilmore Girls, True Blood. Mm-hmm. And then Peter Haskell he's the one that was in part 2. He plays the CEO, and another good turn for him as a CEO and a great kill in this one. So 8 years after the events of the first film, Chucky once again is brought back to life by the manufacturers of the Good Guy doll in hopes that the publicity has died down. But Chucky murders the CEO and goes after Andy, who has been put in a military academy.
Okay, this one. Let's start off with some of the good stuff first, because I have some interesting complaints. But I will say this. I have a lot of complaints about Child's Play 3, but they don't really ruin the movie for me because I have a certain set level of nostalgia for it, and I think it's fun. And I could mostly overlook the flaws of Child's Play 3 because a lot of stupid shit happens in this movie that just, even by the standards of a Child's Play film, this just goes way off the rails in a way that's kind of weird. But one of the things that I do like, I think it has a fantastic opening sequence. I think it might have the best opening sequence of any of the 3 Child's Play movies, despite it being the weakest of that original trilogy. Like, when he kills the big CEO of the Good Guy doll company, what I like about this is that in the original Child's Play script, Don Mancini had injected a little bit more commentary into it on how it was about consumerism and how the greed of marketing and children's toys and the ridiculousness of, you know, like Cabbage Patch Kids, the way that parents are fighting over to get a toy to buy a piece of plastic. So there's more of that injected at the beginning, where you get see the heartless CEO, and immediately, and I know some of what he's saying is kind of cliche stuff that you would expect from a ruthless, mean-spirited CEO. Is the worst thing about this business, it is a business, whether it's military weapons or kids toys. The bottom line is the bottom line. After all, what are children but consumers in training and all of that? So there's some of those social commentary elements in regards to consumerism and the craze of Cabbage Patch Kids and those buddy what were those dolls called? Those buddy dolls?
My Buddy.
My Buddy. And you know, the stories that you hear on the news of parents swarming toy stores and stepping over each other to get these things kind of is touched upon in the beginning. Also, is a pretty elaborate opening kill, the way that Chucky plays with him, fakes him out, brings all the toys to life, gets two other good guy dolls. Hi, I'm Tommy. Hi, I'm Tommy. Like talking to each other. There's a lot of build up to his first kill scene. I think it has an excellent opening sequence. I don't think the rest of the movie is as good as that, but I still think it's entertaining. This is the boot camp one, the Full Metal Jacket edition, and I'm pretty sure there's Full Metal Jacket influence on here. It came out 4 years after Full Metal Jacket, and I'm convinced that was a big influence on this movie. And it's also the kind of jump the shark of the franchise movie when you think about it. Let's put Chucky in military school, in boot camp. And that's the type of twist that you'd expect for part 7 or part 8. It's like Leprechaun in the Hood or Leprechaun Goes to Space or Jason X. You don't usually expect them to start going weird routes like that by the third film. But alas, here we are, boot camp. Interesting setting for it. I'll say that it's an interesting setting, and I kind of enjoyed the setting, even though it just seems so atypical for a franchise like this.
Well, Universal started bugging Don Mancini to write part 3 before part 2 was even released, so he was kind of rushed, and he said he was kind of out of ideas after 2. He didn't really have enough time to cultivate an idea for another whole feature film. So you can kind of blame the military aspect on that, and kind of Andy jumping 8 years later, because the original actor was only 9 when this movie came out, so that's why they had to get another actor, because of the jump in time. But it begins a lot like 2, but it's not quite as epic of a feeling to it. But it's another good title sequence with Chucky's blood mixing with the plastic, and then the whole sequence. Awesome sequence you talked about with the executives, and then it goes into the CEO kill. Mm-hmm. And I thought the military academy I think it's fun in the aspect where the more the officers are dicks, the more you start getting excited for their deaths, especially the barber. The barber's played by Andrew Robinson from Hellraiser.
Oh, and, shit. That barely clicked with me right now. That's totally fucking him. Okay, go on. Okay.
So he's a little bit unhinged, a little bit too obsessed with cutting all these boys' hair. So that's why it's even funnier to me that he's so obsessive about the hair, and he bugs Andy. He teases Andy that he's going to cut all his hair off, and then he gets him like he's going to give him a hardcore buzz cut, and then it's way too styled. It's like styled all pompadour up in the air. Get out of here.
Such a Hollywood.
That's not a... Yeah, it's not a military cut, dude.
Dude, I also think like I wouldn't say they're the villains. Obviously, Chucky is the villains, but the characters that you're meant to root against are borderline caricatures. And on the one hand, I think that kind of kills some of the nuance in like finding it scary when Chucky kills them. On the other hand, it's pretty funny. I actually think that these are some of the most humorous kill sequences, because it's embracing the absurdity of what it is. And I think that's probably one of the highlights of the movie is when he finds the Chucky doll and he decides that he's going to cut his hair, and he loves his little catchphrase, a presto, as soon as he's done. And as soon as like Chucky just slashes his throat really fast, and he's like, presto, you're dead. And then starts laughing. Hysterical. And that's not even the best line. The best line is where he's turning, like you see the blood like pouring out of his throat, and he's like clutching at the mirror, and Chucky goes, it's definitely you. Like
yeah. As I loved about that one, 2 one-liners that both delivered.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely you. Like such a cliche of like the whole new haircut that you have.
Yeah.
But there's
Another. Okay.
go on, go on.
I was just gonna say, another thing I noticed that I love about this one is I noticed right away that Chucky's evil face is more refined. He looks more realistic, and you can get much closer on his face when he's talking and stuff, because that's the first time that they use computers for his animatronics on this one. You can really tell the difference. The
Yeah.
mouth movement and all that really seems organic.
On the other hand, one of the interesting things, this is the one where the doll is least convincing as a cute doll. Where even when he's still, he looks kind of ugly and frightening and Chucky-ish. Whereas I think in Child's Play and Child's Play 2, as soon as he fakes being a normal doll, he looks like a normal doll, like it's a doll that's designed to be cute. In this one, I think he's ugly already, even when he's still at certain times.
Yeah.
It's an interesting choice that they did for this. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, what is that kid's name?
Jeremy Silvers.
Okay.
The little dumb kid.
Yeah, Jeremy Silvers. Okay, that kid. He's a little bit older than Andy was. So that kind of changes the dynamic of a 6-year-old talking to his toy as, what is this kid supposed to be, 9, 10, something like that? He looks a little quite a bit older. For this not to click with the kid when the doll pops out and does that big screaming thing at him and is talking and is having full conversations, I think most kids at that age would register that something is very wrong or something is off right now. For him to be that dumb to think that this is normal, that a doll is walking around and talking to him and playing games and moving and tricking and psyching people out. Obviously, killer dolls are not realistic. That's not something that I require. But within the realm of the film, within the reality of the movie, there has to be a certain level of reality, if you know what I mean, where obviously killer dolls are not realistic, but we're suspending our disbelief. What I don't like to suspend, the type of is how people would react to it. People like, okay, you want to do something unrealistic, fine, but at least have realistic reactions to how people would react to actually seeing a killer doll, to seeing a doll walk around and talk to them and conversate with them. Most kids that age would be really freaked out, and for that kid to go so far along in all these plans and to believe everything that he does is not believable to me in the slightest bit, especially a kid who's supposed to have military training, whose father is part of the academy. Like, they make it clear that it seems like it's a bloodline. Like, his father is somebody who's off doing his thing, and they all seem to be very proud of his father when they refer to him as this great man. So that's just, I don't find him a believable character. That's the biggest thing about it. I don't think that character seems the least bit real to me. And
what
the choices he makes are so stupid that it always has my eyes rolling.
Well, him being dumb is what led to a scene that had me cracking up, dude. When the little kid is running, giggling from Chucky, and Chucky's chasing him, trying to get him so he can transfer his soul into his body. And this kid is so dumb and oblivious. He's thinking he's playing chase with Chucky, and he's running, giggling. And the more the more Chucky chases him, the more he gets pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And every time Chucky gets pissed at that kid, I was laughing. And then the one scene where the kid first gets Chucky, like Chucky mails himself to Andy. So it's given to this kid to give to Andy. So he realizes it's a good guy doll, so he takes it back to his room and opens it up. And Chucky gets out and looks over. Who the fuck are you?
And of course, another great one-liner from Chucky. This one has more one-liners. I'll give it that. This has some than the first two. Is like, tampering with the mail is a federal offense, kid. Like, stuff like that.
Yeah. And then that the colonel gets a hold of him, and he does that thing that reminds me of what they do through the whole thing. He gets Chucky and he starts carrying him. He bangs his head up against the door frame, and then the next scene you see him running around with it, holding him by the hair. And that cracks me up every time. They started in the first one. It's in pretty much all the movies, where somebody is obliviously, they don't think this doll is real, so they're obliviously carrying him around. And it's ridiculously over the top, in an over the top way. They just start slamming him up against things and holding him by the arm. And and you're just like, I can't wait till Chucky kills this fucker. He's getting pissed. I know Chucky's getting pissed right now.
I think what's funny about that is that and I've talked about this with people before. I don't think that's how most people actually carry dolls that look that expensive. Most people, at least most people that I know, if they saw an expensive doll like that, even if they were weirded out and they didn't like it, they would probably pick it up very carefully because it looks like an inexpensive piece of. It doesn't look cheap. It doesn't look like something that's meant to be mishandled like that. I would think most people would pick these dolls up a lot more carefully and set them about. But
Yeah.
everybody in this movie drags them, bangs their head. The first one, Aunt Maggie, she's doing this really weird lopsided gait where every time she steps, it looks like she's almost on the verge of yanking his arm off. I'm like, actually carry dolls like that, or do just people in the Child's Play movies just carry dolls like that? Pretty sure people in the Child's Play movies, they all carry dolls like that.
And then the colonel carrying Chucky like that, slamming his head into the thing and carrying him by his hair. That leads right into my favorite kill of the whole movie. It's when Chucky jumps out at the colonel, and you're waiting for him to turn and jump out at the guy. You're waiting to see the guy's face. And then when Chucky jumps out with a knife, the colonel takes one look at him and he clutches his heart and he goes down. He has a heart attack, and Chucky goes, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." This one's comedy.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of my dad. And then my dad showed me that as a kid. That's the part that he always cracked up on, was the tough, like just curling over and high. And you could tell that Chucky was ready for some like elaborate violent kill. He had that makeup that was put on him smeared so it looks almost psychotic war paint, holding the knife like this. Like he does an extra he looked crazier than he normally does, like he was putting on a show for the colonel. You're waiting for him to like jump on him and start stabbing him or doing something wild, and he just has a heart attack right there on the spot before anything could happen. And Chucky's reaction to it is, of course, priceless. It's funny.
And you remind me what makes it even funnier, that Chucky already has, he's already pissed from having that lipstick on his face.
Yeah, all the lipstick smeared on his face. And when he does that big, like, it's almost like a war yell, what you would describe in Full Metal Jacket, your war face with that crazy red lipstick. He looks scarier and more unhinged than he normally does as a doll because he's pissed off. And it results in the funniest kill scene in the whole movie. And it's filled with stuff like this. This movie's fun. It's funny. I don't take it as seriously as the first two Child's Play movies. But it's enjoyable. I think if you're a Chucky fan, if you enjoy the character of Chucky, what you're going to see is just Chucky dropped into a boot camp setting, running amok and being Chucky. And if you like this stuff, it's hard not to be entertained by that at face value.
Yeah, and I recognize there's some glaring flaws in this, and it's, there's some questionable choices in this. Like the typical military drill sergeant stuff, it's all so tired. The drill sergeants being extra hard on some of the kids, and it's just
Cliches.
You've seen that stuff. It's so cliche so many times, but then the military aspects leads into a great scene, which is a paintball scene, which I've always thought it was pretty cool when Chucky goes in and repaints all the paint cartridges with bullets, and then he kind of watches on the side. He's kind of spectating on the side where everybody's shooting each other, and he just laughing his ass off and having a good old time.
Everybody's shooting each other with bullets when they think that's paintballs.
And then Chucky just rolling. That laugh he had in this one, it was like not an unhinged laugh, like a gleeful laugh, like just belly laughs. Yeah. I thought that was funny, seeing people like brutally shot, and then Chucky on the side just laughing his ass.
Yeah, it's definitely Chucky at his goofiest so far, but fun.
Another good thing, I kind of liked Whitehurst. I don't know what actor played him, the guy with the glasses, he was denying Chucky existed at first.
It's
and
Dean
then
Jacobson, and he didn't really have that big of an acting career beyond this.
Yeah, and then he realized that Chucky is real, and he completely shuts down. He's too afraid to do anything, and then he ends up jumping on the grenade, and it's a pretty gnarly grenade jump. It looks pretty real.
Mm-hmm.
The way it kind of blows his body apart a little bit, and he kind of rises up off the ground. It looks pretty real, pretty gnarly. And I also love when half of toward the end, when half of Chucky's face gets sliced off. It looks pretty damn cool. You can see the meat and stuff under there, and it makes the design of him look really cool too.
Yeah, it's the most advanced puppetry out of the original three films, and it's something that Don Mancini talked about when we went to go see the Chucky pilot. That the with each film, you notice that the puppetry is a little bit better than it was the last time the last time around. That each movie, the movements and the animatronics are better each time out as time goes on, puppetry advances. And it's reached a boiling point with, I think, the new Chucky series, where they've really advanced puppetry and they could really go for it in ways that they couldn't go for even as far back as 2017's Cult of Chucky.
Yeah. So in this one, I thought the military aspect of it was the biggest flaw of it, but we also got some, he also milked some pretty cool scenes out of the military aspect. So it wasn't all bad, I don't think. So it makes a little
what?
The main thing that the military aspect of it that makes it wonky for me and almost kills the whole movie, that damn score. The score had those the military snare drum thing all the way fucking through it. I'm like, enough, dude, enough.
And I understand that's because they transplanted into a military, like to a boot camp. But that style of score, for even in a campy slasher movie, it doesn't fit a slasher film. I could see it sprinkled in a little bit more subtly or here and there. I'm not opposed to it being in there because it is boot camp and it is like kind of a military thing. But I don't think it needed to be so overbearing throughout the entire runtime the way that it was.
Yeah, I kind of understood it when it was setting up the whole military aspect of it. I mean, I would have been fine with those drums being through that whole sequence until the kills and stuff started. But once the kills and stuff started and it became a full-on graphic horror movie, you should have stopped with the drums. It was too much after that.
And I want to say something about Justin Whalen as Andy Barkley. Cut this poor kid some slack, the actor. Nobody was ever going to be Alex Vincent or replace Alex Vincent, so that's not really a fair thing to ask of any actor. So I know he gets a lot of shit for being in this movie, for being the not the real Andy or whatever. But he was just taking a role that he was offered, that if you were an actor and you saw this opportunity, you would have taken it too. And if we're being honest with ourselves, he's not a bad choice as an older version of Andy at that point in time. In terms of his look and in terms of his acting and in terms of how he plays it, he mostly, I think, works in the role. And I think it's not a bad replacement considering what they're doing with the movie.
Yeah, this movie has its problems, but his performance is not one of them.
Yeah, he's doing what he can with the role that he inherited from somebody else, because obviously Alex Vincent was far too young. And of course, we all prefer Alex Vincent. Of course, that's the original Andy. But I think that Whalen does a fairly decent job in this movie, and I think he does as good as you could expect. And I think he has the right look for that point in time, what you would predict an older Andy would kind of look like.
Yeah, and I always thought he looked like River Phoenix. He had a River Phoenix look to him, and he did have a leading man charisma. So I think he should have done more. And I wonder if this movie is one of the reasons why he left acting in 2009. He hasn't done anything since 2009.
Mm-hmm. And the other one, Perry Reeves, who plays kind of like the girlfriend character in this, seems like they're trying to do the same thing that they did with the sister in part 2, bring like a likable female presence that you could root for, and that becomes kind of equal in tow. And I think she does a fairly solid job, but it doesn't stick with you like Christine Elise does in Child's Play 2. But I think they were going for the same type of thing.
Yeah, I thought all the performances in this were good across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the acting was part of the problem at all.
Yeah,
and actually had pretty good writing through most of it. It's mostly just certain aspects of the military thing, I think, is what made it bad. Other than that, I think it's a really fun movie. Yeah. And I've actually rewatched this one a lot more than 2, and I'm not even exactly sure why.
Might have been more current at the time too.
True.
Yeah.
But this also has pretty decent camera work in it. Not quite as good as 1 or 2, but I thought the camera work was good. It's John R. Leonetti. He did the camera work for a lot of the Tales from the Crypt, He did The Mask with Jim Carrey, and then he started working with James Wan and did the phenomenal Death Sentence, Insidious, and The Conjuring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So an excellent cameraman who hadn't quite come into his own yet, but he went on to do great things after this one. And this one started a tabloid panic in England. It started back in part 2, but really amped up in this one. Some claim that the film inspired 2 10-year-old boys to kill another child. There was a rumor that the children would blast their gang leader saying, "Hi, I'm Chucky, you want to play?" And I guess they blasted it over and over again into the ear of the person that they killed. I don't know where that came from because it's completely not true. They investigated it, and the kids did not even see the film.
Interesting. It's
so
probably just kind of like one of those urban legend things at the time when trying to connect to like pieces of pop culture to real life tragedies.
And it wasn't enough of a backlash to get it banned anywhere, but it did inspire a lot of theaters to pull it, part 2 and 3, 3 mostly, because that's when the controversy really started getting feverish at that time.
So go on.
Oh, go ahead. I was done.
Is that the reason why there's such a big gap between the Chucky movies before we get to Bride of Chucky, which is kind of, it's not a reboot. Bride of Chucky's not a reboot, but kind of like a reset, redefining what this franchise is going to be going forward after a long period of being away from the big screen.
That might have been part of it, because it was also was a $13 million budget, and it only grossed $20.5 million. So I think that's another reason why there wasn't another one for so many years.
Mm-hmm. And that lower budget, that lower gross is also the fact that it was rushed. This came out like literally a year after Child's Play 2 came out. And it's fun and everything, but it doesn't surprise me that this is a rushed film given what the setting is and everything. As much fun as it is, you could definitely see the strains on Don Mancini's creativity and where the franchise is going. You could tell that it's somebody straining or laboring to push something out under pressure from the studio, which is why it kind of has, as fun as it is, it still has that quality that it has, because it's a rushed movie that the studio just wanted out as soon as possible just to bank more on Chucky.
And I actually like this film quite a bit, and I think I like it more than you do, but it does feel rushed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it has so many aspects that make you kind of cringe, is that it was so rushed. I think that's the only thing that's wrong with this movie.
Yeah. But regardless, I still like this movie quite a bit as a Chucky fan. It's still fun. It's probably my least favorite of the Chucky franchises, but I still enjoy it quite a bit. And I think that speaks to the quality of the series, that what I think is the weakest entry is still something that is fun and still something that I enjoy watching to this day.
Yeah, and I found it interesting in this one, Don Mancini actually wanted to introduce the multiple Chuckies storyline, but he could not only because of the budget.
Mm-hmm. Something that he didn't push until Cult of Chucky much later.
Yeah, like right from the beginning, the CEO was supposed to be killed. You know how it has a couple other Chuckies kind of chime in and say, "Hi, I want to play." That was supposed to be multiple Chuckies coming in and killing the CEO.
That would have been an interesting way. But I'm glad we got it held off for a while, though.
Yes, I think that's interesting, too, that he takes elements all the way from the first one that he didn't get to use, and he kind of incorporates them later into the franchise. I think that's another thing that makes it a cool and interesting franchise as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, and also, besides being the first Chucky film that used computers for the animatronics, it's also the only Child's Play film where no females die. All the victims are male.
Interesting. Which is a big inversion of a lot of most slasher franchises, actually, where it's all female victims. I never noticed.
I think
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that might be another reason why people didn't like it. Not enough females in it.
There's females in it. They just survive.
Mm.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's different. But yeah, So that's the first three Child's Play movies. I would say that's a good way to end it with the original trilogy, because I kind of feel like the what comes next, where it starts with Bride of Chucky, is a completely new phase of the Chucky franchise, and not, like I said, not a reboot, but kind of a recalibration of what this franchise is and what it's going to be heading into the future. And it takes quite a bit of a turn from the original Child's Play films, that these definitely feel like their own thing, whereas the later movies have a much different quality to them, and their focus is a lot skewed. It's skewed in a much different direction than the Child's Play movies are.
Yeah, it becomes much more campy and comedic.
It's much more Chucky based, and I mean, Andy Barclay does come back like in small parts later, and like you first see him teased in Curse, and then he has a supporting role in Cult. But I think the removal of Andy as the lead character of the franchise is what really switched it off in a completely different direction.
Yeah, and one thing I have to say, we'll talk more about the casting as we get into the other movies. But just from the first three movies, excellent casting in all three of them,
Mm-hmm.
and that excellent casting continues in this TV series. I love the young cast. They seem to be perfectly chosen, and then I love the aspect of them mixing it up with all the old cast from the whole franchise. So it's really something to get excited about. And if you've seen the pilot of the Chucky series, it does not disappoint. It's everything we wanted all these years, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the season.
Yeah, so check that out. It's on USA and SyFy right now. Really good extension of the franchise. Very modern, but in a way that feels appropriate, because obviously the story takes place now. This isn't the 80s anymore, so I don't really want to hear any bitching or whining from people out there. Why isn't this like the original movies? Because the 80s are fucking over. That's why. Because it's 20.
Yeah.
So with that being said, please check it out. I think it's totally awesome. It's totally worth seeking out. And next week, we're going to be tackling the last four of the Chucky movies and giving a little bit more of our detailed opinions of what we think of the current television series on USA and SyFy.
Yes. All hail Chucky.
All hail Chucky. So, yeah, keep up with us. As always, follow us on social media, facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. That's where you can find us on Facebook. Check out our TikTok, which is really cool. A lot of interesting stuff going on there. That's at Horror Show Official. Our Instagram is in the process of being switched over, but if you want to check it out for now, it's at Pickles Horror Show. And if you want to see where we're available, where you can watch us and where you can keep up with us, just click the flow code that I always click on it, or copy and paste it into a web browser. I leave it in every description of every episode.
And play along with us all the rest of this month. James and I are both doing our annual October horror subgenre challenge. This is our 7th year doing it, and we're doing it a little bit different this year. James is doing the challenge by himself on the TikTok page, and I'm doing it by myself on the Facebook page. So entirely different selections on both pages. So go to both of the platforms and play along with us and tell us what you choose for each of the subgenres. So it's a different subgenre every day of the month this month, of my favorite month.
Perfect. Till next week, folks, happy horror.
Happy horror.